Hello and welcome back to World 360. Why are tensions rising between the US and Bangladesh, and what does a visa policy have to do with it? Who is Ben Roberts-Smith, Australia's most decorated living soldier who lied about killing civilians in Afghanistan and deliberately hid potentially damaging evidence from a court? We answer these and more in today's episode. So first up, US and Bangladesh. Tensions have been rising between the two countries in recent weeks, especially as Bangladesh prepares to go to general elections in January 2024. If you recall, in late April, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina arrived in Washington, D.C. to attend a ceremony marking the 50-year partnership between her country and the World Bank. She spent 7 days in Washington, D.C. before leaving for the UK to attend the coronation of Charles III and his wife Camilla. So what happened during these 7 days? Well, perhaps the better question is what didn't happen. For one, Sheikh Hasina did not meet US President Joe Biden, as is usually expected when a head of government in an official tour overseas. We had in fact covered this in a previous episode. Also, while attending the ceremony celebrating 50 years of relations with the World Bank, Sheikh Hasina even presented the World Bank president with a picture of the Padma Bridge, a project which the World Bank had declined to finance in 2012, citing corruption concerns. Now, this was viewed as quite a tongue-in-cheek move on Hasina's part. Keeping this in mind, let's look at a critical decision that the US State Department made in recent weeks that indicates the iciness in US-Bangladesh ties. In late May, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced a visa policy to promote democratic elections in Bangladesh. Under this policy, the US will be able to restrict the issuance of visas for Bangladeshi citizens believed to be responsible for or complicit in undermining the democratic election process in Bangladesh. This includes current and former Bangladeshi officials. Shahryar Alam, Bangladesh's State Minister for Foreign Affairs, responded to this move by saying the government is not bothered since it is committed to free elections anyway. Now, this visa policy is being viewed as a strong message from the US to Bangladesh PM Sheikh Hasina to ensure the upcoming elections in 2024 are as free as can be. If we zoom out for a second, all these developments encapsulate the US's skepticism about Sheikh Hasina, who has been in power since 2009, and alleged manipulation of previous elections in Bangladesh, namely in 2014 and 2018. So let's rewind to 2018. During the general elections that year, Sheikh Hasina's Awami League won by a landslide, getting 288 seats out of 298. Let's not forget that the opposition party had boycotted the election held in 2014. So what happened in 2018 and 2014 clearly didn't sit well with Western powers, especially the US. The recent visa policy from Washington against certain Bangladeshi citizens is indicative of that. Let's also not forget that Bangladesh was not invited to US President Joe Biden's landmark Democracy Summit for the second time this year, while its neighbors India, Maldives, Nepal and Pakistan made it to the list. To top it off, in April this year, Sheikh Hasina accused the US of seeking a regime change in Bangladesh. They are trying to eliminate democracy and introduce a government that will not have a democratic existence, she had said in parliament. Therefore, the road leading up to Bangladesh's general election is sure to be paved with more frictions between the Southeast Asian country and its key export market, the US. How Bangladesh balances its relations between the US and China will also be something to keep our eye on. For our second topic, we're looking at a report by an Australian think tank, Lowy Institute, that says China has scaled back spending in Southeast Asia. Last Sunday, the Lowy Institute released a report mapping aid in Southeast Asia, in which one of its key findings was that while China is the largest development partner in the region, implementation problems have seen the scale of China's financing decline in recent years. It also found that India is the second largest non-traditional bilateral development partner of Southeast Asia, with a yearly average of $70 million dispersed in the region. But back to what the report says about China. It notes that between 2015 and 2021, China's official development finance, or the ODF flows in Southeast Asia has declined and in turn affected China's relative importance as a partner to the region. In turn, traditional partners like the World Bank and other multilateral development banks still dominate development financing in the region at about 80% of the total. After China, Japan, Europe and South Korea aren't too far behind as major lenders, and the US and Australia have been described in this report as mid-sized players. According to the report, China's contribution to the region fell from $7.6 billion in 2015 to $3.9 billion in 2021. About 85% of China's financing in the region is in the form of non-concessional loans, 10% is in the form of concessional loans and 5% in grants. Now, there's an important point we have to remember here. Non-concessional loans usually come with higher interest rates at market value as they are seen as commercial loans. Concessional loans, meanwhile, have lower interest rates. That means most of China's financing to Southeast Asia are coming with steep interest rates. Usually, Chinese loans come at an average interest rate of 5% compared with a typical 2% rate on an IMF loan. Another thing I wanted to mention is that this report from Lowy Institute comes a couple of months after a report by Aid Data, a US-based research lab, found that China has ramped up bailout loans to countries that are part of its Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. This report, released in March, says that these are mostly low and middle income nations that are part of BRI, which have received Chinese loans for infrastructure development like Sri Lanka, Pakistan and Turkey. The report found that China disbursed about $250 billion worth of bailout loans to 22 developing countries at risk of default over the past 2 decades, with the trend accelerating in recent years. Now, this may not be very surprising given BRI nations have been battling soaring inflation, are still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, and are facing the economic ripples of the Ukraine war, which have hurt their ability to repay debts. This has further fueled accusations against China of so-called debt traps and opaque lending. Now, if we look at these two reports, the one that was just released and the one that was released in March, they seem to suggest that China has had problems implementing its economic and infrastructure projects in countries that it is lending to. And some of these countries that are key to its geostrategic plans aren't going to satisfactorily pay back Beijing anytime soon. So for our last topic, we're looking at the man who has been dominating Australian newspapers for the last few weeks, Ben Roberts-Smith. 44-year-old Ben Roberts-Smith is widely regarded as Australia's most decorated living soldier, but a recent defamation case that he has been fighting appears to have backfired and led to the discovery of some skeletons in his closet. Let's rewind for a minute. Ben Roberts-Smith joined the Australian Army in 1996 and very quickly rose to fame due to his impressive performance on army tours abroad. In 2006, on his first tour of Afghanistan, he was awarded the Medal for Gallantry for actions as a patrol scout and sniper. In 2013, he retired and formed a consultancy. Now, in June 2021, Smith sued 3 Australian newspapers, The Age, the Sydney Morning Herald and the Canberra Times, and began a defamation trial against them based on reports in which they accused him of war crimes. The trial ended in July 2022, and last week, Smith lost the case. The judgment was delivered on 1st June this year in favor of the newspapers. Smith's case was dismissed, finding most of the war crimes and bullying allegations against him substantially true. The allegations included that he had murdered unarmed prisoners and civilians while serving in Afghanistan and tried to intimidate witnesses during this trial. Since this is a civil defamation case, Smith has not been charged for any offences. He merely lost the case. That said, he is reportedly the subject of an Australia Federal Police inquiry into alleged war crimes. Thank you so much for watching. This is Pia Krishnankutty for ThePrint.